Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Reveal Report. I'm your host, George Iceman, and thank you for joining us on this Friday as we kick off this unbelievable weekend with a brand new episode. And this episode is continuing the series we did a while back about relics, relics of power, ancient relics, the mysticism behind these relics. Why is there so much mystery and power in these certain things? Well, some of the things we're going to discuss, we're going to try and shed some light and let you see, because maybe some of these things you have no idea existed, or maybe you've seen these things but had no idea why it had so much power. So today, our discussion is to discuss why it has maybe so much power, why it exists, and why you may have seen it here, there, and maybe in different religions. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to discuss that, these certain topics of conversation as we get into the occult, the supernatural, the esoteric. And we thank you for joining us on this amazing conversation. Please like, subscribe, and share. And we thank you for being here. It's going to be quite amazing. I'd like to bring on board right now my co-host and author, Miss Jessie Czebotar. Jessie, how are you today?
Hey, good, George. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Friday night, we're getting ready. I know some people have popcorn. They got their favorite snacks. They're sitting back. They're relaxing. We have Pedro with us. We got Black Hats with us, of course. Victorious is with us. Alexis is with us. So many amazing listeners and viewers and supporters of the channel from all over the world, all over the globe are tuned in today. Relics, Jessie, relics. So much power in relics. People will spend an eternity, a lifetime. In fact, Hitler himself had his own special group that went out with all kinds of money and power behind him to try and find these ancient relics. And we discussed some of those on one of our past shows. I do apologize for my color. It wasn't like this before I went on air. It's actually annoying, to be honest with you. And I don't know. What can I tell you, Jessie? There's only so much I can take of this red, and I'm trying to figure it out. It's been going on for months.
You got it, George. We will just take it.
It's annoying, and it's aggravating, to be honest with you. But let's try and continue these conversations about relics. I have a few video clips, and the first artifact is something that people may have seen, especially in the Latin culture. A lot of Spanish people, look at this, or you have pictures of this particular Virgin Mary pictation or picture. I want to show everybody and explain to everybody what it is, because the Latin culture really gravitates around this, and maybe you never knew why. But now, hopefully, we'll shed a little bit of light, and you'll see why. So, Jessie, take a look. There's a video. Crank up your volume.
There we go.
Here it is.
Cloth painting of the Virgin Mary. It was 1531 when a Mexican farmer named Juan Diego suddenly heard an enchanting voice. Shortly thereafter, the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to the farmer, who instructed the farmer to ask the bishop to build a local church. At first, however, the priest didn't want to believe Juan's stories, which is why he insisted on proof of his divine visions. So it was then that Maria asked Juan to pick some flowers and bring them to the bishop. When he did as he was told, an image of the Mother of God is said to have miraculously appeared on the farmer's coat. The sacred cloak is still on display in the Basilica of Guadalupe today. Particularly amazing is that although the picture is now almost 500 years old, it hasn't faded a bit over the centuries. Even the scientist who studied the image of the Virgin Mary in detail couldn't explain how the material withstood the gnawing ravages of time. A bomb explosion in 1921 also couldn't damage the cloak, even though it was only a few meters away from the explosive device, which finally completes the myth of the mysterious relic.
So it's also known as Lady of Guadalupe, is what it's referred to, Lady of Guadalupe. But it's the picture of the Virgin Mary. And that picture appeared on the cloak. Mm-hmm. It's 500 years old, Jessie. And I have a picture here I'd like to share. It's in actual the church there, and there it is, framed, and the color hasn't changed or faded in any way, shape, or form. But this is a very popular, the Lady of Guadalupe, famous in the Latin community. A lot of pictures are sold. You'll see medallions and so forth. But now you know why and the mystery behind it. It's from this picture, the origin, over 500 years old. What's your comments on this, Jessie?
Yeah, fascinating story. And, I'm somebody I think very scientifically around some of these things. I'm always curious because of the connection, particularly with the Catholic Church, the Jesuit Catholic Church, and the occult. Um, where did these things come from? What are their continued purposes? There's a lot of things in the system they use, particularly, in my experience, they used types of cloth for certain dimensional access that could include lace or a way to communicate. They would witches would use veils or things like that they would put over their face that then would allow them to communicate with the spirits in necromancy or with fallen angels. So I'm very curious. I want to know, like, what type of cloth is it? Was the image imprinted on there, or was it literally painted after they saw the image onto the cloak? And, what type of materials did they use in this? And how does that affect, why it hasn't degraded? So very curious, I like to look at all those things.
It's a very interesting thing. The story goes, the legend is that it just appeared on the cloak, but it was the painter who heard a voice and he brought these flowers and this just appeared. So it's on some type of cloak fabric. So it would have been I would
Probably a cotton or a linen or something.
Maybe a linen. I don't know
then.
about cotton. Maybe a linen, possibly. And this conversation, I love it because it goes in so many different ways. It's biblical. There's a reason why you were not to wear cotton on certain days and so forth, especially in the tabernacle for the certain priests. It was linen for a reason. So maybe let's discuss that. Why would it have been linen and not cotton, Jessie?
Well, it is interesting. Linen comes from flax seed that they would grow. And, I've watched some videos on how they make that material or get flax seed, the stalks from flax plants to turn into linen and stuff. So it's very interesting. But besides that, cotton was something that would easily, if it got wet or mildewy during specific seasons, that made it more difficult to, keep their clothing long term. So I think that was part of why the Lord had told them, to not have the cotton per se during certain seasons. I guess I'm curious too, because particularly with the priest robes, they had to go into the presence of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder what was the difference between, linen and cotton in the presence of God with the glory. Does it absorb light better? Does it vibrate better?
It's interesting. I know the Lord did mention, I think biblically in the Old Testament, it refers to also sweat. And you are to be clean, cleansed, and purified when you're wearing the linens. In fact, you were ordered as the priest that when you left, you were to take off those linens and your chest plates and so forth, and not travel and do your thing with them. They were only to be used in the tabernacle during prayer time to the Lord and offerings and so forth. So again, how interesting, Jessie, that down to even the fabric that you would have to wear, there was a reason. And it's in scripture about garments. Very unbelievable. So again, you'll hear that even in today's day and age, depending on what cultures. Maybe monks possibly, and you'll go to certain ancient ruins with maybe old priests where they'll only wear linen made from hand, dyed from the trees and the plants to get that black, because they
all natural.
All natural. Nothing was shipped in, brought in with any chemicals. Everything is done and so forth. So again, fabric, and it maintains. I mean, if you look at, let's say, for instance, certain Japanese outfits from like the samurai, this comes from like a heavy canvas, a different type of fabric, and it seems to last a very, very, very long time. So again, very interesting. But it goes back again to this relic. What was it made of? The Lady of Guadalupe. But now the video, you understand the story of why it's so popular in the Latin community. And you'll see this in, again, pictures that are bought, put into people's homes. It appeared to them. And there was even another, let's say, a pennant that you would wear around your neck, where it was supposed to bring you, good tidings and wishes and protection. And many people wanted that, and it actually did. So again.
Yeah, and they put that pennant on, I've seen those, a lot of rosaries will have that pennant on them as well.
Correct. So I find it very interesting. Another relic of power. In fact, the Pope and many bishops went to this church to look at this, to pray over it, because even they were in shock over it. So hoax, I don't know, but it's 500 years old, and you would need some unbelievable knowledge to create something like this to last this long. So it's definitely supernatural, and it is considered an ancient relic. So there you have it, relic number one. The second relic, and there's many opinions to this piece, and I only put it on my list so people could understand the history of the world and how this thing, even though it's a bad relic, it exists. And there's many relics just like this today that exist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a video of our next relic. And this next relic, ladies and gentlemen, is the telephone from Hitler. Take a look.
It was given to the British officer as a gift by the Russian officers who had shortly before occupied the building. This piece is estimated at $200,000 to $300,000. It will open at $100,000. Where it can go from there, I have no idea. There's nothing like it. This phone is a weapon of mass destruction, unlike anything we've seen before. And it's taken a lot of lives. He would have used it at command posts. He would have used it on the move, possibly from his train. And in the final years of the war, it apparently was with him also in the bunker, where he took his life. He would have issued orders of all kinds. This is a vitally important relic, so that people remember what Hitler did and people like him did. Time tends to erase these memories. An object like this brings them back. If you see something like this in a museum, you're going to know what this was used for. It doesn't become something you see on a military channel or on a history channel. This is real. This caused a lot of death and suffering. People need to remember that.
This is an incredible point of conversation, because this goes in so many different directions, Jesse. Now, I've always said that in certain hauntings, there's always negative energy attached to an object. Some people pick it up from, it could be an antique shop. You could pick it up at a bazaar, at a fair, at a market. It may come with the house. Someone was passed and gave it to you. And these objects have energy, usually negative energy. So here is Hitler's phone that's being sold on auction. I think it's gone for $300,000 plus, $300,000, $250,000. Show the back of this phone here. The question is, two questions I have. Is this authentic? Is it a real phone or a device, a scam created for somebody to make money? That could be a possibility here. It's hard to.
Could be.
The story says it comes from the soldiers that they took it as a prize for what they did, but we don't know. And second, will this go into a museum or private collection? Now, make no mistake, and Jesse, you could conclude this, that the elite of this world has some of the most rarest relics on the earth that are used to help them manifest spiritual energy, to communicate and conjure the supernatural. Can you comment and what do you think about that, Jesse?
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's one of my questions is, especially if this goes to be a private relic, is it a way that they would use to try to, in a form of necromancy to try to communicate with Hitler or, because they will use in seances when they summon the dead, they would use old relics or something connected to that person. So that'd be my question, with all of we've talked about witchcraft before and how they will use different objects like that. And you've brought out how phones were originally used as a form of communication with the dead. So, it sounds like they're going to try to do it in a museum. Again, we have to remember that mass deaths are associated with this phone, and how easy it is for individuals like Hitler and the elite to simply make a call. And with that call can come, mass casualties. So it is a big deal.
I'm going to share a story with you, Jesse, and to the viewers about a few Freemasons who would summon the supernatural world. They would conjure up. And what they would do is they would find artifacts that would help them to create that energy. And in this particular case, these Freemasons purchased or somehow got possession of an electric chair from a jail. And they brought it to do rituals, to summon spirits, that possibly would manifest these negative energies. Can you imagine bringing an electric chair to a lodge to do these ceremonies? This existed. This was talked about, and it's absolutely unbelievable. For those making comments on my color, I do apologize. Something is off with the lighting. I do apologize. Sorry, guys. Don't comment about it anymore. It'll annoy me and I'll want to stop the show because I keep reading the comments. I do apologize. Let's try and continue and stay on topic. So, Adolf Hitler's phone, Jesse, do you think it has negative energy associated with this, and anyone who has this will have negative things happen in their life?
That's hard. I haven't seen a lot of stories about the negative energy with it per se. They would tend to want to isolate or segregate it if there was. Have you heard of any stories or a lot of negative energy with it?
I mean, the story of the phone is interesting. That artifact was Hitler's phone. I'd like to find out the name of the person who purchased it at the auction and see what museum it went to, if it's at a museum, because a lot of artifacts, I say, are for personal collection. Now, right. I will share with you, I have a personal collection of things. I was a former occultist, practicing occultist. Now, let's rephrase that. So people say, George, are you practicing the occult? I don't practice the occult. Technically, I'm still an occultist. Why? Well, an occultist is someone who studies hidden knowledge and ancient information that is not brought to light. So I still read about these things so I could talk to you about it. I don't practice it. I'm not involved in any type of magic or sorcery. So that's not my life. But I still read the information so that I could, bring it to you and discuss it. So I know that
It's more like
occultists,
the field. I think that's
yes,
what you're explaining, is that there's
correct.
a field or terminology
Yeah,
for those who study in that field.
yeah,
So when you say those things you're referring to, it's a field of study versus, as
correct.
most churches or Christians would see an occultist as somebody who's practicing Satanism or Luciferianism or engaging in witchcraft, and that's what you don't do anymore.
Correct. I don't do any of that, but I do continue my research on it and I still dabble in books. Back to the artifacts. One particular thing that I have is an actual book, first edition, very rare. I wouldn't sell it because I don't want it for myself, but I hope to one day have a museum so people could see it because it's part of history. Signed by Aleister Crowley. Now, this is something, the only reason I have is because it's very rare. And I think everyone should see it. It should be on display and people should recognize what type of things these people were associated with.
Mhm.
And so I have it, and I don't use it to glorify it. I don't read any spells from it. I just have it part of my collection of things. And I think it's important that everyone sees it. So possibly, Jesse, the next event possibly that we do live, I will bring with me a bunch of very old artifacts, and I'll have them on display like a mini museum so people could see them, read about them, and be aware of them and understand these things exist and they're there. So I wanted to talk about that so that people could see them and be aware of it. But anyways, not to steer away from these artifacts, but this artifact, Jesse, could it have negative energy attached to it? Could negative things happen around it? Can people use that phone in a seance to conjure up some kind of negative spirits? What are your thoughts? Yes or no?
Yeah, I believe there's always the potential or the possibility for things like that. I think more importantly, is exactly what you were talking about, is that, if we have these items, if we bring things into our home, it's important to pray over those things to remove all negative energy. And, you know, I'm somebody who also believes in using things, um, to show what they were supposed to be used for, but, to as things that we learn or research from, particularly books or special writings from certain individuals. It's important that we're not afraid of these things.
Yeah.
The Lord has not given us the spirit of fear, and certainly his power is so much greater. His spirit in us is so much greater that the church has tended to condone or, get people to have that fear response towards these things. And when we do that, we don't gain that understanding or that wisdom of how does the enemy work? How does he use these things? How do we get rid of them? How do we get rid of that negative energy? So it's important to have that discussion and to
Yeah.
understand these things.
I agree. There should be nobody in the chat with fear. This is
Right.
all about shining light on the darkness to bring you up to speed, to bring you to that point of awareness so that you understand that in every facet of society, the occult is emerged in it in all forms, including a
Mhm.
cell phone or a phone. We even did a
Absolutely.
decode on cell phones, ladies and gentlemen. And when you look at it, it's black and it shadows a black mirror, which is used for scrying. Scrying is a form of communicating with the supernatural, the dead, and the demonic in different rituals. And it was made famous by a particular witch or wizard who worked for the queen a very long time ago. In fact, his magic was Enochian magic, is what it was referred to. And
Mm.
you'll never guess, Jesse, I think I mentioned to you once maybe what his nickname was for the queen. Do you know what his nickname that the queen gave him was? He had a code name, how he was referred to.
I don't remember. What was it?
His name was 007.
Oh, that's right. You did mention that to me.
and he would practice alchemy because these people were alchemists. So again, everything is in front of you, but also hidden at the same time. I want to get into our third relic. Guys, you're so lucky. We're going deep here, guys.
Yeah, this one is the most interesting, I think.
This is an interesting one, and we're going to get into this right now. This is something you may have seen, but it's somehow been erased from the internet in many ways. A little bit hard to find. So I want to shed some light on it and get your opinion, Jesse. So, ladies and gentlemen, sit back, turn it up, take a listen, take a look. It's mostly video, actual footage. This is footage, so it's not like a documentary or talking, but actual footage. Take a look. So for those wondering, that particular statue, some mention Nimrod. That is not Nimrod. I do not believe it to be Nimrod in any way, but possibly, maybe Gilgamesh. Maybe Gilgamesh. And I have a picture of it so I could share it with everybody. Here it is. This discovery was in Iran. 3 tombs. Was it a Anunnaki? It's 12,000 years old, and the body is completely intact. Now, from these pictures, you could see his crown. That's one of them. There was 3 giants, actually, that they found. 3 of them. A lot of gold. The one at the bottom with the beard, that one at the bottom, is the one I believe to be Gilgamesh. And this is the famous statue of Gilgamesh. Now, you notice there is a lion under his arm. And that's not a dog or a pet. That's a lion because it's depicted that he was a giant. Very interesting, because of these statues isn't to make him, that he's with a pet baby cat here. That was a lion, which means he was a massive man in size and height, because that was depicted to be a lion and he was a giant. Here's his face right here. Gold. I mean, it's intact. It's in stasis. Look Look at this. This is a powerful ancient relic from Iraq. Take a look at that.
Yeah, and I noticed like on the crown, that shot there, it has that special work around his pineal gland. You see, how they would after their death, they would embalm and they would put their organs in the jars that we see around him,
Mhm,
and bury those with him.
mhm.
So very interesting that some of the same practices we see in Egypt, we also see here, in the preservation and stuff. But the question is, if he's in stasis,
Mhm.
what does that exactly mean?
Well, stasis would mean he is in somewhat of a deep sleep. He isn't
Right?
dead. He's in stasis. He's sleeping in this type of tomb that's covered because he's intact perfectly. 12,000 years old. Gilgamesh. Talk to us, Jesse. What is the story of Gilgamesh? Why would the elite want this relic in their possession?
I believe it would be for power and control. Gilgamesh we hear was a mighty, mighty giant warrior as well as a king, and was able to conquer and go forth. And there's rumors or referrings to in the system of in the last times, that they plan to shake um, the lower realms and to release those fallen ones that are held captive in the lowest dimension. And, their goal or their plan is to bring forth these legends, these titans, these giants in a last battle at Armageddon. So, the question is, has he really been reserved? Has God allowed that? And do they have him in stasis with hopes that as those end days get closer, that he will be released and will march out into battle? So,
It's interesting because it's going to be our segue into the final segment of today's show. More than one type of artifact. It's going to be a very interesting video I'm going to play, and then we'll comment about it. But it kind of ties in, and that's why we're doing it in this way. A giant, his DNA seems intact. That gold, that power,
mhm.
that stasis. I'm sure the military would have a field day to have access to this. The question
Yeah.
is, where is this giant at this time? There was 3 of them, they said. 3 of them they found.
Mhm.
Where are these giants right now? Where do you think they are, Jesse?
My personal belief is that they're located at Mars under Area 51, but that's my
Why?
belief.
Why do you say there? What's happening at Mars at Area 51? What are they doing down there?
There's an end time ritual that they are planning, and you know, I'll just say they've got things set up in that area to receive those giants or the legends who come forward. So,
Very, very interesting. Do you believe this relic to be authentic and real, an actual giant? Or is this a hoax perpetrated for publicity? What are your thoughts?
I personally believe it is a real relic or real that he's really there in stasis. Excuse me, hold on. Sorry about that. Yeah, I believe he's really there and in stasis. So,
Well, I guess time will tell if that relic truly is Gilgamesh. And our 4th and final video in association with relics, relics of power, ancient mysticism, things that people want. There was a war in Iraq, Jesse. Bush sent out his soldiers because they apparently were going after weapons of mass destruction. I will remind everybody they never found any weapons of mass destruction. But there were many things that happened there, including the looting of homes, gold, and museums. And they went after artifacts, Jesse. ancient artifacts. I wonder why that is. Well, in doing research and tapping in, I tapped briefly on some of these artifacts I'd like to share with everybody. But before I get into that, let me play the video so that people can understand what I'm going to be talking about and the theory behind possibly, maybe, why they went to Iraq. So take a look, take a listen. Here it is.
I might be able to fill in the blanks on that. And now, for the record, ladies and gentlemen, I did not hear Tom on Coast to Coast. I did not talk to him about this. This is the first time I've ever heard this. But during that time, again, I was in contact, and they contacted me because evidently something, and only they can tell you why, but the point being is they got what they were looking for. And the general told me this. He said, Steve, we wanted two things, and we got it. We got it before anybody else got to it, okay? He told me, and these are the guys that operate beyond the regular military. They're beyond the NSA. They're beyond a lot of things, okay? But they wanted two things, Tom, and this is, you don't know, so I'll fill in the blank there. According to active duty 4-star, the point is they got the DNA that they're looking for, but they also got the control mechanism and the power source to basically activate what most people have come to know as the Tower of Babel. God destroyed it, obviously, but the point is by confounding their language. But that which Saddam Hussein had was the primary reason that we went into Iraq. The ancient technology, and God bless all of you who are listening to this that have cosmic and magic clearance, the technology, the DNA. And when I say DNA, I'm not just talking about, DNA of the entities that they can reconstitute, et cetera, et cetera. I'm talking about the formulas that you've referred to so many times in quoting the passage in concerning Nimrod, that he began to become a Gibborim. So I can only tell you, Tom, according to the sources I had, and they contacted me, and again, I want to share something real quick, and I'll turn it right back. The people that contact me for one reason. They say that because I've been telling people the truth. That may not go well with my critics. When I can check out a certain general through different ways, or a couple generals, and people say, well, you can't possibly know those guys. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I do. And so even from in the military community, now I'm not bragging, but what I'm saying, look at tonight. I have never talked to you, Tom Horn, about this incident. You have never talked to me about this incident. Yet tonight we're putting, 2 and 2 together. And see, it's kind of like, I would say this, it's a binary binding of truth for a single purpose, a single focus. If they've got that, they've got the technology of the ancients. You know how the Pentagon refers to these guys? He calls them the gods of the Sumerians, okay? The gods, little g's. So the point is that the fallen angel technology, the fallen angel power sources, this is what the illuminated ones, the globalists, if you will, seek to, number one, control the world with, but they actually believe they can make war against God. So knowing that, the point is that it puts the whole battle of Armageddon, it puts the whole battle in the heavenlies. The book of Revelation talks about the devil and his angels fighting against God and his angels, and they get kicked out of heaven.
This is unbelievable stuff. Unbelievable. Give me your rundown of what you just heard and your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I heard him saying that, that in Iraq, that Saddam and the Iraqi people had the elite, we'll just say the hidden DNA of the fallen ones, the Samaritan gods, which would be, what we would call demonic generals, and that they had what they believed was their fallen angel DNA.
And technology.
Yeah.
And technology. So in that video you just heard, by the way, I believe that to be Steve Quayle. I believe that's who it is. And he's incredible. I highly recommend you sought him out. He spends a lot of work.
He's a good resource.
very good resource in the Nephilim and the giants and the fallen ones. He tries to, go back to maybe the book of Enoch to bring you that truth and what exists. So the war in Iraq wasn't necessarily what we thought it was. He is claiming that there are generals that contacted him to tell him we have the power source that we need before anybody else got it, and the DNA of possible fallen angels in Iraq, because that was old Mesopotamia. Here is a picture of them looting the museums and artwork and old ancient ruins of Iraq, old Mesopotamia. So the elite want this to help them in their war against God Almighty, to bring upon revelations. Do you believe it?
I do. I mean, I personally have testified that their goal is to, usurp the throne of God in the last days. But we can be spoilers. The Lord's already, told us in Revelations what happens, that they don't win the battle. They don't even get a foot into heaven. Even if they could get all those spiritual gates open with angelic DNA and with the activators or different items that they would use, the Lord says that, that he will meet them on that battlefield, and there they will be slain with the breath from God's mouth.
Yes.
So we know the end of Revelations. We know what happens.
But just listen to what you said, that the breath of God's mouth will slay them because he'll meet them on the battlefield. I'm human, and that gives me fear. Goosebumps. Why would a fallen angel think it's a good idea to challenge the creator who made them? Your destruction is inevitable here.
Right? Yeah, they have no chance. I mean, the Lord's already decreed what has happened. But I think that's part of the delusion or the great apostasy, is that they truly believe that they are gods. And we know that there is only one God. And in the end, they will know that too. They will know that they are not gods and they cannot become gods.
Yes.
That's the difference, is that, he always has been God. He's existed eternally. They have not been gods. They feel like they fell, they were cast out of heaven.
They didn't fall.
But they've always sought to be in that place of God, and they will never be there, because they're right, no one can create something from the breath of their mouth. Only God can do that.
1,000%. So Iraq, ladies and gentlemen, some are saying now, as you heard Steve Quayle, that it wasn't necessarily about war. Well, maybe war for them to get power, their power source, the key to opening up these gateways, portals, these CERN-type places around the world, and the DNA of fallen angels. Here's another picture of what they did. They ruined it. They went after all these unbelievable things in the museums in Iraq. And a very famous story is about the giant in Iraq. And I've touched on this briefly. Steve Quayle touched about this and a few others, that they found a giant. Those 4 soldiers there, I believe out of those 4, 2 or 3 have come forward to testify to their experience of them killing this giant red-headed person they found in a cave in Iraq, old Mesopotamia. And they want these relics of power, to give them knowledge and power to do battles in the heavenlies. But we are soldiers of God. And here today we make a pledge to be in prayer, to give glory to God, and to reveal to the world their plans. And we do not give them permission, authority. We do not give them opportunity. We say no. And we do God's work in the heavenlies with prayer and fasting. And we raise our vibration to give Almighty love, compassion, forgiveness, and happiness, because when you raise that vibration, it destroys that negative energy which they want on Earth. And it belongs to people's aura, this negative energy. And when they come near you, you want to maybe push them away or make them smile and laugh and turn that frown, upside down and get rid of that negative energy. So, Relics of Power, ladies and gentlemen. Unbelievable show because I get to communicate with you and talk about these things, and we get to shine some light upon it. How interesting about the Iraq War and its real meaning. Jessie, anything you want to say to the audience before we say goodnight? Another amazing show.
Absolutely. I agree with you so much that, we have to raise that energy level. And how do we do that? That comes by walking in the power of the Holy Spirit. And, you get that by being in the Word and by being in prayer. So I encourage people, really get into the Word, make the time, invest the time to be in prayer. That's how we're going to make the difference in this world.
It's unbelievable. Jessie, share with everybody, where you're going to be, where they can see you, and how they could contribute to your ministry.
Absolutely. You can contribute two ways. The first way is on my website, illuminatethedarkness.com. On there, we support veterans, survivors, and whistleblowers who have been speaking against the things going on by the Brotherhood system and the U.S. government. So you can make donations on there. If you want to support me personally, you can do that on patreon.com. And if you want to learn how to really live in the authority and the authority and the spiritual disciplines and the power of the Holy Spirit that the Lord has given us, you can find me on my other website, kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. I have a lot of great courses on there that teach you how to really live.
There you go, guys. And I want to personally say thank you to everybody. I apologize about this color. I'm working on the lighting. I don't like to look red like a grapefruit or something. They're doing it to me. Something technical is going on. They're making me out to look like a villain. But the truth is the truth. And if you hear it, you shall know it. If you like this program and you appreciate the information we bring you every single Friday here on YouTube and you're willing to contribute, please go to paypal.me/George Iceman. It's in the description and in the chat. Anything helps and goes such a long way. Jessie, following this, we are going to Patreon to have a special Q&A. So if any of you had an opportunity to ask questions to Jessie or myself, something you want to know, something you want to ask, then please come to Patreon. Following this show, we'll be live coming up next on Patreon. The link is in the description. Join today and you can have a conversation, ask some questions, and enjoy some of the content that I post every single month. Again, thank you all for watching. Get outside, get some fresh air, get some vitamin D, raise your vibration and give grace, glory, and praise to God Almighty. Jessie, that's our show for tonight. I want to thank you all for watching, and good night.